So you want to make your first quilt, but you don't really know where to start. Well, I'm here to help. So there are a couple things that you're going to have. The first thing is a sewing machine, rotary cutter, rotary mat, probably a pair of scissors, ironing board and an iron. You're definitely going to need some pins, 2 charm packs for a throw size quilt. These are the Buttercup and Slate by Corey Yoder. She's one of my favorite designers. And you're going to need about a yard of border fabric, and that's all we're going to need for now, but we are going to need more as we get further into the process. All right, before we get started, let me know in the comments down below if you're making your very first quilt or if you're just here to watch a quilting video. The first thing that we need to do is figure out how to size and design your quilt. In the description down below are the typical sizes of quilts for you to start as your baseline. They're more suggestions than anything, so you can make it whatever size you want. The great thing about these 5-inch charm packs is they're already pre-cut, so you don't have to cut them down to size. You can buy yardage and cut it down to whatever size that you want, but I love using these charm packs for a very, very fast, easy quilt. A typical throw quilt is around 52 inches squared. 2 charm packs is 84 squares. I'm going to go ahead and do 9 across by 9 down, which gives me 81 squares. 9 charms across finished with a 1/4 inch seam allowance is 40.5 inches. To get to 52 inches, we need at least 6-inch borders. You can change this math to make it whatever size you want. There are no rules, just guidelines. The first thing we're going to do is lay out our charm packs and figure out what kind of design we want. So this is where we decide if everything looks right. We're going to have a 6-inch border around it in that dark gray. There are 2 that are kind of speaking to me that need to be changed out. Not that I mind it, but this one, it kind of looks like a solid white. There is a pattern in there, but I think I'm going to go ahead and switch it out. We'll do this one. I think that this right here needs to be moved over here. I think that this gray one right here is just not going to look right in the corner with the dark gray border. So we're just going to switch this one with this one. I think that is going to be my final lineup. You need to take a picture of the quilt with your phone because it's going to make it easier if you have little mess ups. Start kind of like I'm reading a book. Pick them up left to right, top to bottom. We're going to start with this one right here. We're going to go top to bottom. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just want to make it to where we can understand what we're doing. So we have our first row from left to right going top to bottom. We are going to start sewing them together. So in order to make this as fast as possible, we're going to do something called chain piecing. You're going to take the first 2 and you're still going to keep the leftmost one on top, and you're going to get it lined up as close as possible. And then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance on one side. That means that you are sewing a 1/4 inch from that very edge. Something that I don't really see mentioned a lot is that you need to set your stitch length to 2.0 because it holds your quilt together a little bit better. You can use a foot like this. You can use a foot that has the guide. And then we're going to take our next set, line them up. Set the presser foot down. And then you want to make sure that you're not pulling. If I have this right, it should be laid out this way. I am going to double check with my picture because I always double check. And then we're going to sew these seams together. So we're going to flip this one over onto this one. Take it to the sewing machine. And then we grab this one and line those up. And sew the singleton one on, and then our last seam for the top row. So this is our top row from left to right. In order to make our piecing process as smooth as possible, each row needs to have the seams pressed opposite ways of each other. So I'm going to press this one to the left, and the next row will all get pressed to the right. And there we go. All the seams pressed to one side. We'll just do the next row. All right, so we've got all of the rows sewn together. Now it's time to start sewing together the columns. You can either do this top to bottom or bottom to top. It doesn't really matter. I am going to start on what is my bottom because it's closer to me. Flip this over, take your pins, start working along that seam, push the seam together, get it nice and nested, and then pin it. Same thing with the next one. Just going to start sewing along the side that we pinned. Make sure our seams continue to lay the same way. Slow down and sew right next to the pin and then remove it. Do not sew over your pins because you'll break a needle. Ask me how I know. All right, it is all sewn together. It is the following morning. I worked on this quilt top along with recording video for a total of 3 hours yesterday. In all honesty, it probably took me an hour and a half, 2 hours, but recording the video does take a bit of time. The first thing we're going to do is take our yardage and just check and see if it is wider than the actual fabric, and it is. So we know that we are only going to have to piece 2 of the sides, not all 4. Our second step is to iron this and get all of those wrinkles out, because if you are cutting with your rotary cutter over a wrinkle or a crease, for instance, if your fabric is doubled up but you have a crease over top and you cut, you're going to have a pretty big mess up. So I ironed the fabric and cut out my 6-inch borders, and we need to sew these borders on. So we just flip this over and get it lined up. So since this is such a long piece of fabric, I am going to throw 6 to 8 pins in. That way the feed dogs don't pull the bottom fabric faster than the top and make it wavy. So if we have the pins in, it'll prevent that waviness. The short borders are sewn on. We're going to press them open. To reduce bulk, what we're going to do is set this down on the ironing board this way, set the seam with the iron, and then fold it over. Keep these seams flat so they don't double up, and that'll reduce a little bit of bulk in the quilt for whenever we go to quilt it. So the borders are ironed open. I need my glasses. We are going to line our straight ruler up with the edge of the quilt, and then I am going to go off of the pointy part of the charm pack. We're going to make it square all the way around. That's good. And then cut off that extra, top and bottom on both sides. So when I said that we had to piece 2 of the borders, it's because this border lined up over here, we still have about 8 inches or so overhang that isn't being covered by this border. This was the 5th border that I had cut out, so I'm going to piece it together. In order to piece this border with this piece of fabric to where you don't have to worry about the selvage, we're going to line up this piece of fabric all the way across on a line, and then come over about 1 inch off of where it starts to turn from the selvage to the fabric, and just cut that off. And then we line up these 2 fabrics, right sides together. I'll stick a pin top and bottom, and then just sew a 1/4 inch, and then we have our pieced border. We are going to repeat the process that we did on the side with the top and bottom. Leave enough overhang, that way it can be trimmed off exactly square, and then pin all along the side and sew both of the other borders on. Well, that was it. Maybe 4 hours total to make this, along with recording the video. A beginner could sit down and have a quilt top done like this in less than 3 hours. If you want to see more content like this, then please consider subscribing. And if this video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up. That way it can reach more people. I will see you guys next time.